So I recently went to Sydney and rode on their metro as a tourist to get a feel of their public transport system. And it was good to try another state's public transport system to get a feel of the competition. Though I'm sorry Sydney-siders, because today we're digging further into Perth's public transport system. That's the state I'm in right now. I live here. In particular, Perth's summer of free public transport and what the state of publicly available transport might look like going forward in WA. Now, it's been over a year since we last looked at Perth's policy of a free travel summer. And this year, it's back. Bigger and longer. Well, it's over now, but it was back bigger and longer in January. So I figured we'd take a look at this past summer of free public transport for Western Australians and ask the question. It certainly was bigger, but was it better? And are we actually closer to a more accessible, freely available public transport, or are we just being placated with yearly handouts to stop us whinging for a better system? What incremental improvements have come, and what would a perfect or even ideal public transport system even look like? Well, for that and more on the state of WA public transport in 2025, we go to... Yep, that's me. All right, Dan, you take it away. Yep, great. All right, well... WA. At the end of last year, they kicked off their summer of free public transport. This time, it ran from the 14th of December to the 5th of February, so almost 7 weeks. And that was an increase over the previous year's program that only ran from the 24th of December to the 28th of January, so about 4.5 weeks. On top of that, Perth's public transport map now looks like this, when a couple of years ago, it looked like this. Now, getting to this new and improved map has taken time and required some line closures during the construction period. But I think we can fairly say that today there are more bus and train routes available to the WA public than ever before. So with more train lines and a longer free period, that's how we get to bigger and longer. But was it free, or was it free with an asterisk? Because, you see, that was essentially my main issue with last year's program, was that it was free with a smart rider. Now, a smart rider is Perth's version of a travel card. You know, most places have their own local travel card, or they let you pay with your phone or a bank card. WA does not currently offer the ability to pay with a phone or a bank card as opposed to a smart rider. Now, they are adding capability maybe later this year, but they don't currently have it. So no points to WA on that one. Because you see, this is all where I get frustrated with the claims that this policy is free. Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes of my criticism, I do just want to acknowledge something first. It's a great place to even be that we get to adjudicate different types of free, when there are other places in this country and certainly around the world where free public transport is just a pipe dream and it's not realistic, let alone accessible for the majority of people in a lot of places around the world. And because of these policies that we're going to talk about, functionally, many Western Australians have been able to access free public transport in the last couple of years. They have and will use this policy to travel for free, and that is a good thing. So I just wanted to acknowledge that caveat before we get into it. Because, of course, despite this policy not being perfect, and I'll get into why, it is broadly a cost of living relief measure, which has provided cost of living relief for at least some people. But I just can't call it a perfect policy because the smart rider requirements really do undermine the freeness of the policy. Not to mention that if the rides are free with a smart rider, then what does tagging on even do other than just give the government the ability to track you? Now, I do happen to broadly believe in freedom of privacy and freedom of movement. I think if you believe in those things, maybe that's enough of a reason right there to scrap smart rider requirements. But for now, let's set aside the freedom and privacy concerns, and let's talk about a couple of other government policies to do with free travel that, in my opinion, can not just nullify the freeness of the program, but actually, for some, make it quite expensive. So they have a couple of other policies here. We've got here Fare Free Sundays, which is free Sunday travel with a smart rider, and free travel with a student smart rider, which, as the name would suggest, requires a valid smart rider, which, you know, honestly, none of that ended up being a problem. Students and people traveling on Sundays, they have free transport to this day. No issues. Can you believe that? We definitely didn't get it wrong, right? Right. So yeah, if you're like me and you heard free student travel along with smart rider required, then you might have thought, I know kids, and they're notoriously not the best at remembering a small piece of plastic to take everywhere they go. Honestly, that's not even taking into account kids who might live in a household or with a guardian that just doesn't care enough or doesn't have the means to take them to get their own smart rider. And so, as we can see, this policy, when first implemented, resulted in over 1,000 students being fined $100. That's crazy, dude. Just for not tagging on with a wow. Which to me is pretty shameful when you've got a policy that is literally designed and supposed to offer free travel to kids, and what you get out of that is multiple kids receiving fines. And I mean, seriously, who do we think are the kids that are getting these fines? The kids that are not tagging on, or the kids that don't have parents who were able to get them a smart rider? It's underprivileged kids, right? Kids from a bad background, or who come out of poverty, or neurodivergent kids who probably wouldn't forget their smart rider if it was taped to their hand. So these are the kids that are paying for the policy or paying the price of this policy. And at that point, I don't think it's just unequal, it's also actively discriminatory. And even if there were rich kids who forgot to tag on, or forgot their smart rider, or God forbid saw a sign at the train station saying kids travel for free and assumed they wouldn't have to prove that they're a kid, even if it were those rich kids who had to pay the fines, I would still think it's not fair, because we shouldn't be paying for cost of living relief measures by fining children. Call me crazy, but I just think maybe we could design a version of free public transport for kids that doesn't fine them for using it. I mean, look, if we're talking about graffiti or vandalism or assault, I can understand fines in those contexts. But if all they've done is get on a bus or a train, well, that's literally the point of the policy. So what have they done wrong? And as you can imagine, this issue persisted when it came to Fare Free Sundays. As we can see here, pretty crazy headline. If we zoom down, we get a total of 5,000 infringements that have been handed out on supposedly fare-free Sundays. Is that a good thing? Do we think that's good? Because again, who bears the brunt of these kinds of fines? It's probably neurodivergent adults or poor adults who thought they could finally travel for free, or you know, like a family who saw a sign that said free travel on Sundays and assumed, oh, yeah, we'll be right. No, you won't be right, mate. And how's this? You had a Minister for Labour, Jackie Jarvis, admit in a government hearing, whilst conditions were clearly articulated in the media, some passengers did not realise that free transport was contingent by using the Smart Rider system. So they even admit they're not fining policy dodgers or even rule breakers. They're fining people who, by their admission, didn't realize about the Smart Rider requirement, which to me just doesn't seem like enough of a justification to implement all of these fines. And in fact, she goes on to admit the reason rides were only free for Smart Rider users were to ensure statistics were captured and for security purposes. So the Smart Rider thing, when travel is free, is literally just so the government can track you. Now, I'll take them at face value that they're using this data simply to determine what routes are hot or not, what tweaks might need to be made to different lines, and the amount of ridership overall. But should the punishment for essentially not signing up to the government's data program be $100 fine? Specifically for using the policy that they're claiming makes transport free? Well, apparently even the government doesn't think that that's an appropriate punishment, at least not for kids, because the Public Transport Authority says a direction was issued to officers not to fine students in uniform traveling to and from school, meaning that they can absolutely recognize the disconnect of fining people over a policy that's advertised as free. So where do we even go from here? The government's free transport summer is over, but it will likely be back later this year, and their free school rides and free Sundays are all still ongoing. Like I said, kids apparently aren't getting fined by transit officers. I would be surprised if they haven't told their transit officers something similar with regards to the free Sundays. I hope so. I'd be surprised if not. And if we look to the future, WA public transport fares overall are about to come down. The recently re-elected WA Labor government has pledged to reduce the current zone system down to a single zone with a flat $2.80 fee for any fare. That is undeniably a good thing. And when you pair that with increased infrastructure funding for more roads and more train lines and expanded free parking, you ultimately get a lot of cost reductions for the average everyday West Australian. And I actually think it brings costs down across the board for both public transport riders and commuters. But there is a difference between affordable and free. Affordable public transport is still a commodity, whereas free public transport is a right. In fact, to look at an example of totally free public transport without any asterisks, we don't even have to look outside of WA itself. We run cat buses across Perth and Joondalup, and they're popular. Our Premier just promised, when re-elected, to open a new cat bus line. Okay, so cat buses are not cats filled with buses? Okay, so cat buses are not buses filled with cats. As cool as that sounds and as good of a business idea as that is, that's not what they are. Central area transit buses, or cat buses, you see they do have a cat logo there. These are completely free buses that go around like little city areas, CBDs. And these buses, they drive around all day. They don't have a tag on tag off system. You just hop on when you want and hop off when you want. And I know that a lot of students use these to get to and from uni. I know that people in the city use them just to get around. It can make it easier for tourists to get around and see the sights. And while there aren't a huge amount of cat buses on the road, it shows to me, at least, that free public transport fully, unconditionally, is a matter of political will. It can be done. It has been done, and we've already kind of implemented it a little bit here already. So my question is, why don't we just make public transport free? Fully and properly free. No smart rider requirements. You can get rid of those turnstiles that really just act as a way to make it harder for wheelchair users to get on and off public transport, and make public transport a right for Western Australians to see and traverse everything this beautiful state has to offer. I'd even take optional smart rider use, right? Like if the state still wants to be able to track some people and see what routes are hot or not, make it an opt-in thing, right? Like you can have a sign that says, if you'd like to help us understand which lines are busy and, manage the traffic as best we can, feel free to tag on with a smart rider. Asterisk, smart rider optional. Now, that's the kind of asterisk I can get around. And frankly, that just seems more honest and upfront. I think it's a legitimate cost of living relief measure that I really think would be popular. Now, to cap things off and to just quickly illustrate why I really do think this is a matter of political will, let's take a look at Luxembourg, a place that I'm admittedly not hugely familiar with. But what I do know about Luxembourg is that since 2020, public transport has been completely free across the entirety of Luxembourg. Trains, trams, buses, it's all available for free. All of it is just paid for, yes, by taxes, but provided as a service to the public that anyone can use whenever they need to. And not only have they made public transport free, they've also gone above and beyond when it comes to accessibility. We can see here they have a program called Adapto. Adapto is a transport service in Luxembourg for people with reduced mobility. Adapto transport services are free of charge. And as we can see here on the main page, advertised, people with a disability can also use the Adapto service, a taxi bus with door-to-door service. So that's like free Ubers if you happen to be, disabled, mobility impaired, or let's say like you're too old to be able to get around on your own. And to me, this essentially ensures that somebody's disability or their mobility or their age don't act as a barrier for them to be able to access transport services, and ultimately allow everyone to have a right to connect with their community. That's what we want. We don't want financial barriers, disability barriers, any of these kinds of things that prevent everyone in the community from having a right to access that community. So I say we go with the Luxembourg model. I mean, no turnstiles, no fees, just available transport for all. I mean, isn't that kind of the point of calling it public transport? Anyway, my message to the WA government is this. Clearly, you'd like to provide some financial relief and more transport to the public. So I'm saying go for it. Fully. Just make public transport free, fully free, without an asterisk. Just go the full Monty, give us free public transport, fully free, and watch it be a popular policy. You may even end up leading the nation on something that isn't mining, which would be great. Let's do it. Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to hear out what I have to say and hopefully engaging with some of the points that I made in this video. If you'd like to see more like this, go ahead and subscribe subscribe to this channel, like the video if you enjoyed what I talked about today, and stick around. Maybe next time you'll enjoy the video more. Maybe you'll enjoy it less. Gamble. Well, let's find out together. All right. Well, thank you. See you next time. Goodbye. Cheers.